Welcome to the first episode of Diversity Season 2. We are live, I hope. I'd like to welcome all my guests. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know everyone's really busy with National Inclusion Week happening this week, so I appreciate everyone taking out the time. Which brings us to the topic of discussion for this week's episode, which is inclusion. So I'm really excited about the questions we're going to get into, but just quickly, if I could just get people to just introduce who they are, what it is that they do, and then we'll dive right in. So we'll start with you, Jack.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Jack. I am the co-founder of Dinc. And Dinc is a brand new soft launch stage social and professional networking app with a focus on inclusivity and diversity. We're live in the app stores now, but we're going to be pushing towards a full launch at the end of this month. What we're trying to do is create a safe platform where people can express who they are and where businesses can connect and engage in meaningful conversations around inclusion. We've created the platform to encourage more collaboration among people, among networks, among businesses and industries at a top level when tackling D&I issues and promoting what they're doing within the space. To do that, the app itself has a number of networks that people can join. We can also create private networks if you've got like a small group that you're a part of in location-wise. So say if you're in a women's network in Bristol, we can set you up with a private network. And we've got a lot of content on there, and we're going to be pushing for a lot more as well. We've got a lot of amazing contributors as well that have started to use the app. So that's a bit of an overview of Dinc and what I'm doing in this place at the moment.
Cool. And we're one of those amazing contributors, obviously.
Exactly, yes.
And we'll come to Charlotte next. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi everyone and listeners. My name's Charlotte Wells. I work for Experian, a big data and financial services provider around the globe, really. But I'm sat in my little home office in a small village called Haddon in Loughborough, Leicestershire. So I've wore a few hats in my time at Experian. I joined as part of the recruitment team, was there for a few years, and that's how I actually came to meet Chris, was because of our previous engagement in how we recruit diverse talent within the Nottingham region. I then moved into a global HR position which looked after the diversity and inclusion strategy. It was an absolutely fantastic role, one that saw me setting some really ambitious targets for Experian's diversity agenda. Recently moved back to recruitment though, recruiter at heart, you can't keep me away from it. So I've been back for 4 weeks now, still with my diversity hat on still, so looking at how do we recruit equally and fairly to ensure that we have the best possible talent leading Experian's way in the future. So that's me.
Amazing, thank you. And we'll start Steve as well.
Hey everyone, so I'm Steve. I'm the founder of The Branding Man, an agency set up a couple of years ago. Basically, I'm on a bit of a mission working with employers and getting them to improve communications. Basically, in my head are a school teacher, basically. And so social mobility is really important to me. And there's this phrase that bounces around when we're talking about diversity: if you can't see, you can't see. And I look at it and kind of go, well, you can't understand what's explained thoroughly either. So a big part of communications is actually helping people to understand doing once they get into the workplace. I do.
Amazing, thank you. And Aimee.
Hi, yeah, I'm Aimee. I'm a London-based marketing professional, and I am co-founder of Become. So Become supports young women of colour to kickstart their careers. So it all kind of came up, I've been to lots of events and I've organised a lot of events in and around London mainly. And you hear from these incredible speakers and it's very inspiring, but you don't actually hear how you can get there too. There's no tangible foot in the door. So it's all about hearing these amazing speakers, yes, but then also following up with mentoring opportunities, shadowing opportunities, internships, grad schemes, scholarships, whatever our speakers can offer. And we've got a really broad range of speakers from lots of different industries, so law, maths, coding, you name it. And it's all in partnership with CamFed. So in coming to the event, you'll also be helping women in Africa with their education as well.
Cool. And myself and Aimee, we met through a mutual connection. Rita, we're both members of Women in Hospitality Travel Tech. So we're both kind of big advocates for females within that industry, and myself as an ally, and Amy's an integral part of that group as well. We'll come to you, Rich.
Hello, I'm Rich. I'm a diversity consultant and creative director, also founder of the Diversity Standards Collective. We're a kind of a hybrid agency, basically, which looks to connect any company with diverse views and opinions from across the globe, so we can stop misrepresenting in content and advertising, and produce more authentic communications, in a nutshell.
Cool, thank you. And last but no means least, Pat, you appeared on the very, very first episode of Diversity, so thanks for joining us. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you do?
Sure thing. I was about to start that way. Hello, everyone. I'm Pat Caldwell. I am the head of people at FundApps. We are a small tech company that works with financial institutions all over the world to help them stay compliant with a growing, changing base of regulation across the world. This is my second time being part of Diversity. I am from my home office in New York as well, although I've come via Australia and UK on the way. My passion for a long time has been around LGBT inclusion, amongst obviously a broader field of inclusion, mostly because I've spent most of my life and most of my career pretending to be straight. So that lived experience, I guess, has driven me to really want to try and create workplaces where, regardless of people's backgrounds, identities, perspectives, they have a home and a place to contribute and do their best work.
Cool, thank you very much. And I'm Chris. I am the founder of Your D&I. We run diversity inclusion workshops. We also carry out audits and consultancy for your business as well, and all things diversity and inclusion. And also your host today of Diversity Podcast. Again, just want to say a big thanks for everyone for joining us today. I just want to start. Obviously, this week's National Inclusion Week within the UK, and the theme being each one reach one. I know there's been a lot of conversations about what that actually means. I mean, for me, it's more of a kind of pay it forward type thing, where we're having these conversations with people around inclusion, and hoping that conversation will continue to kind of lead on to conversation with other people. Steve, I know obviously you've been quite prominent this week in social media about kind of your views on National Inclusion Week. What does it mean to you, each one reach one?
Good question. I think for me, I was having a conversation with my best friend actually over text last night about this, because he'd seen me sharing stuff yesterday and was kind of playing a little bit of devil's advocate, similar to the way you were, Pat, on LinkedIn just before we all delved in. Kind of like saying, oh, it's all fire and well, like I was talking about inclusion and everything, but I don't really have time to do that, and I feel like I'm doing my bit already. There's others that can be doing that within the organisation. So I feel like the one week one message is a really good opportunity to actually get everybody to play a role in being more inclusive, because look at it this way, I looked on LinkedIn, especially around BLM, in the depths of the lockdown, kind of all these lead roles started popping up everywhere. And I don't think it should be something that falls on the shoulders of just one person in an organisation. That's essentially what inclusion means to me. It means everybody taking responsibility and moving that forward.
Yeah. I suppose that leads on quite nicely to you, Aimee, because I know we were having a bit of a conversation about these roles last week, weren't we? What does it mean to you, and kind of what's your thoughts, I suppose, on these roles that are coming through just now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely positive that companies are striving to change. I think a lot of companies don't actually know what to do. They just want to be a part of the conversation, and they do want to change, and it all comes from a good place, but they might not be well advised on the best course of action. Yeah. I think it's really important to have a seat at the table and be an active part of the conversation. So I personally found that doors don't tend to be closed to someone like me, but I do find that when I'm actually present in these offices or meetings. young woman of colour. And to be completely honest, I'm never sure if that's because of my age or because of my race or my gender. It could be anything, but I just definitely feel that nobody looks to me for the answer. They look to, my white male colleague and expect them to have the answers. So I think inclusion means, yes, being allowed through the door, but then also listened to when you're there. That's why it has to be about diversity, inclusion, and equality. Yeah. Just by me being there, the company's ticked off their diversity quota in some capacity, but actually, are they then involving you in the conversation, and are they treating you equally to, your other employees?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's a really good point. Pat, what does inclusion mean to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose everyone's going to have a slightly different view on the basis of their own lived experience. I guess I can only take it from times that I've either felt inclusion or not felt inclusion. For me, I think the biggest part of my own inclusion is having psychological safety. It's knowing that when I come to work each day, sometimes even when I go home each day, that I do feel a sense of safety in being who I am and displaying my own identity. Now that's extremely fluffy for a lot of HR teams to try and, take that concept and apply it across the whole company, right? Yeah. And it is usually unfairly HR teams who are kind of held accountable for doing that, even though it's everyone's responsibility. Mm-hmm. So for me, I know I'm in an inclusive workplace when it's less conscious around how I'm actually having to behave. I don't have to think about whether I need to be careful describing my partner as a he, or I don't need to think about whether I can talk about my own history with LGBT or some of the causes I volunteer with or something like that. It happens naturally, and that's when you know it's there.
Yeah, I think that's quite important. What about you, Jack, as well? What does the word mean to you, the word inclusion?
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with that it goes to the distance of creating the ultimate goal of a workplace where you have a real sense of belonging, where you are respected and celebrated and catered for who you are, and where who you are doesn't hold you back in any way. You can do anything you want to do and achieve any goal that you want to achieve. The each one reach one piece, that butterfly effect of encouraging people to collaborate with each other and speak to each other and just keep the inclusion topic up there amongst people, and that's where the barriers get broken down and people can actually make real change.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's been quite interesting this year is I feel like there's been more activity around National Inclusion Week this year. There's been more social media posts. There's been a lot more activity on LinkedIn. There's a lot more businesses talking about it as well, which can only be the positive thing. I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit based on Pat's comments on Steve's post earlier on LinkedIn. So between the two of you, what comes first? Diversity, inclusion, or belonging?
The post that you're talking about, so I did a poll on LinkedIn last week and asked people to say which one of those, and it came out as 50% belonging and 41% inclusion. It was only 32 factors, so is it representative of large population? But it does put a seed in my head, especially because I spent my career working in recruitment. The targets are set for the number of females, the number of black people, the number of gay people, and we're not really kind of doing any favours focusing on that. Those stats that have come are representative of what we're thinking. But then, Pat, you played devil's advocate and suggested.
Yeah, and I should put the disclaimer on that one as well. The question I asked is, I think we're all fairly confident that over time, if you get inclusion and belonging right, you should be able to build more diversity within your team. If you've really got all the pillars in place, right from the start of your recruitment process through to your engagement of your people, how you develop, how you promote, if you get all that right, you should be able to bring in a more diverse workforce. And it came up a couple of weeks ago around, when I joined Fundapps was already actually incredibly diverse for a tech company. I think we were close to 40% female representation. We had good LGBT representation. We had, I think, 17 nationalities in the first 26 people or something like that. So from all metrics aside, actually, it looked like a fairly diverse kind of workforce. And without any HR support, without any D&I strategy, I felt inclusion from the moment I walked in. And the challenge I think I was throwing back on LinkedIn was, is there in some shape or form a way that it works both ways? If you have a more diverse team, are you more likely to actually have an accelerated rate of inclusion? Is it easier to reach inclusion if you already have diversity?
Can I answer?
Yes.
I definitely agree with you, because I think that if we go from a basis that most companies are predominantly straight and white males, I think inclusion comes first, because inclusion to me is that when I walk into a meeting, I feel like those people aren't prejudging me on my diversity, for example. Because as a white gay man, I can feel my privilege and feel it being lost. So I can walk into a meeting, talk about myself, talk about the fact that I've got a kid, and these set of stereotypes and presumptions are put on me that I'm a straight white guy with a kid. As soon as I come out or drop the bombshell that I'm not only divorced from a man, but I've got a boyfriend, etc., everyone gets really confused, and they're like, well, and then these different sets of ideals come upon me, and actually then I'm slightly not listened to, or people don't know how to approach certain conversations, and I can feel the change. And actually, inclusion to me is them not placing those judgments on me and treating me the same, whatever they hear, whatever what they heard. What I'm trying to say. Not changing upon me what they hear, basically. Or if you don't have the sense that I do, if you are a person of colour, you can't walk in with that same change. So people should be approaching the same way. If your team is more diverse already, everybody has the same mindset of including people who are different. So I think that accelerates, because I personally think that when you're part of a community, you embrace lots of others as well, and you are much more willing to hear people's stories, not prejudge people on what you've heard. Whereas if you're not from those communities, you don't. So I would tend to say that I agree with you that a diverse workforce means that you can walk in and feel like you belong, because everybody's different and brilliant for it.
Yeah. Charlotte, what's your point of view on that?
I've been sat here just in awe of everyone's opinions and views, because, wow, honestly, the energy and the views that you're all sharing are just exactly how I'm feeling. But I think earlier on in the discussion, diversity of thought was mentioned, and this is something that I'm really trying to factor into a lot of our processes and a lot of how we even approach meetings, because what we're talking about here is the visible, and there's a lot of factors to be taken into account with neurodiversity, and how do we actually have the inclusion to meetings to make sure that people can express in a way that they feel safe, or that they actually have that space and freedom to process and then come back to the virtual room. So that would be the only spin that I'd put on it at Experian, where we've seen a massive increase in engagement since people have been able to work from home. So COVID has done really well for our autistic members of our teams, because they felt that they're in an environment that is stimulating them from a sensory point of view, and they're having time to read through agendas and preset questions for meetings and stuff like that. So in that aspect, this last year has been a real growth area for Experian, to be able to have that neurodiversity inclusion more than actually the more physical elements.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That kind of shouts a lot about the type of organisation that Experian is, and kind of the type of inclusivity they're promoting, because there have been some horror stories out there of autistic members of staff at other organisations that have had a really, really hard time adapting to working from home, because they've almost been lost, because there's just been no communication. So that speaks volumes for kind of the amazing work that you're doing at Experian, and that there's been a real focus in making sure that everybody's involved in everything that's happening at the minute. So kudos to you guys. So I suppose the next question for me is, and I'm going to open this out, so feel free to answer, When was the last time you felt included? In society or within business? When was the last time you felt included?
Oh, sorry, I've frozen there.
Right,
it was. I'm back. Yeah, mine was with you when we started the Women Hotel Travel Tech project that they asked us both to work on. So there were 5 of us. We were all from different places, time zones, backgrounds, but all of our voices were really valued, as experts on this task. So particularly in the kind of coronavirus setting. You're on a Zoom call in your bedroom, and I was just sat talking to someone in Scotland, Berlin, Los Angeles, and in the context of a global pandemic, you can easily feel, excluded or marginalised or isolated. But that's what made it so special, because you kind of come together still to kind of achieve this shared goal. I got to speak to some amazing people, and everyone wanted to listen to my voice and my ideas as much as I wanted to listen to theirs. So there's no sense of competition or fighting to be heard at all or anything like that, because everyone was given the respect they deserved as people who had authority on the subjects. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's quite a special group of people that we have as part of that project. And I think it's something that WHTT do really, really well, is bringing different people with different experiences together and really creating that sense of inclusion, that sense of belonging, and ensuring that everybody's voices are heard. So I think it's really important. Jack, what about you?
I think my experiences might be slightly different, as my background's in financial services. I've worked in a lot of asset managers and private banks within the UK. And as a straight white male, I form the majority, so I come in every day. I've never felt marginalised, particularly other than maybe the fact that everyone I work with had a degree and I don't, but that's far from anything anyone else has had to put up with. So I've never felt unincluded through work, but I've certainly been, by far the massive majority, certainly where I am and where I've worked in the past, that improving inclusion was more on my mindset than feeling included, which is why I've branched out into doing this, because I was at a stage in my life, turning 30, settling down, having kids. Do I want for my future generations of my family to come into the industry that I was working in and feel unincluded themselves? And I didn't want that for them. And it would be enough, certainly my experiences, to actually put them off actually joining certain aspects of my industry, which was particularly within trading. That's probably my input. I've never felt particularly marginalised as such. So through the work that I do, I've always felt included, but it's a real push to try and improve inclusion for others.
Yeah. What was quite interesting there is when you mentioned about not having a degree compared to a lot of other co-workers and things. Was that ever did that ever impact any aspect of your career, the fact that you didn't? Because I've been in that situation myself where I couldn't progress any higher up within a business because I don't have a degree.
Yeah. I mean, certainly within recruitment, when I've applied for a job at a particular hedge fund, and they came back to me and said, "You've got 10 years experience as a trader, you can do the job, but we refuse to hire people who haven't got the degree."
Yeah.
So don't get through the door. So
it's basically like you're thick, you can't do anything. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. 10 years of industry experience versus me going out and getting drunk when I was 18 and
my degree was colouring in for a living, so I don't know how that counts as being intelligent.
Mine would have been. I was good at heart.
Charlotte, I suppose kind of coming over to you, like obviously we met last year at Thinclusive, and that's kind of where our connection started. I know you've opened up a lot in the last 12 months about kind of your personal side of your life, I suppose. And so, when was the last time you felt included, either again in a social instance or kind of within the working environment?
I really loved what was said earlier on the call when I can't remember who it was, so apologies, but mentioned that inclusion was just being able to be yourself without question and feeling safe in doing so. So I would say that since I am 32, only came out at work when literally a year ago, but I've been out in my personal life for since I was 18, and for me, like, coming out at work was a huge deal. I put it on this massive pedestal, and really just I felt like this big, like I'd deceived people. And do you know what? I must say, people cottoned on. They knew something wasn't right. I got some feedback off someone that said, like, as part of an end of year review, said, "Hey Charlotte, you know, you're great at this, and this, but I can't help but feel you're withholding something." And I was like, do you know what? Shit. I like had a word with myself and thought, yeah, I'm just gonna be myself. And now it's like I don't feel that I have to explain things. I can be scatty, I can be me, and I literally just feel like there's no curtain, and it is just me being myself at work. I also love that now I can just say, yeah, I'm bi, and people are like, oh, okay. But I do think that is some privilege around my gender as well. I think that there's a lot of stigma against people who identify as male or as trans that are bi, and that probably wouldn't have the same reception. So I am very aware of that as well. But yeah, I think every day I feel accepted at Experian, and socially, I mean, my family still think things are a phase. I'm from a religious family, and they think things are a phase. And, you know, sometimes it's a case of picking the conversations that I have with them, and whether or not it's worth my time. But when it comes to other people, I'll be relentless in being an ally. But because I can accept, you know, how my family view me, and that's up to me. But when it comes to how my family will speak about something, you know, that I consider myself to be an ally for, I'll absolutely be there representing. So I think at work, it's now just all day, every day. But from a family perspective, and where my family's religion comes into play, it's a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I think that's. I think that happens quite a lot with families, and when religion's involved as well, is that it can be a bit more complex. And I suppose it's almost choosing your battles, and about those types of conversations that you want to have. I think what was really great last year is when you kind of publicly came out on LinkedIn, is the response that you got, and you were almost this kind of beacon of, you know what, it's okay to be bi. And it's a thing, and it's real, and it exists, and it's not just a phase, and it's not just a kind of thing that you go through. And I think for a lot of people, like, you were that kind of first point of call, and I see more and more people kind of owning the fact that they're bisexual now on social media. And I think you're partly responsible for that, because of the positivity that you sent out there and the message that you sent out there last year. So I think it's amazing what you do, and kind of what you did historically as well.
Oh, thank you. That's a real honour. I wear that badge with pride. Thank you.
Yeah, they need to get a badge made up or something, and you can have an actual physical badge. Yeah. I suppose going on from inclusion, Aimee, I'll come to you first, and I'll move on to Steve as well. Is, when was the last time you felt excluded?
Oh, I mean, there's been so many times. I'm going to be really truthful here. It does happen all the time, and it's not something that is overt necessarily. But I've been working in the technology industry for 2 years now. It's very masculine, very corporate, and quite hierarchical as well. There's such a set order, and almost without fail, every meeting I've had where I've invited along a male business manager in the team, they have assumed he's the one in charge every single time. So he's the one they address their questions to, he's the one they shake hands with first, he's the one they look at throughout the meeting, even when I'm talking. And you feel as if you shouldn't be there. You feel as if you're sat in the wrong meeting. Like, you know, you feel frustrated. You basically feel like everything you're saying is falling on deaf ears, and that they'd just be more comfortable if I got up and made them a cup of tea, or like start cleaning up after them or something. like the feeling of being sat next to a colleague and people assuming they're your boss just because of their colour or sex is very frustrating and so undermining. Like, you work so hard to get to where you are. To have people just dismiss you on something that's out of your control is quite difficult. I find that really frustrating. And I really struggle not to do this whole kind of like sort of one-upmanship and try and justify myself and why I'm there. I kind of feel like I need to do that, but you don't. I realise you really don't. You can't change other people. And if they want to have that perception of you, fine. I prefer to kind of smash my work and prove them wrong in that aspect.
Yeah. I don't know if you're open to sharing, but obviously when we first had our chat a couple of months ago, and you talked about your experience at university as well, and the situation around eye colour.
Yeah, mad. Like, that is, it's still, I mean, it is rare to have, to be mixed race or to be black and have blue eyes. And I get people come up to me all the time and sometimes like, you're weird, like, are your eyes real? Like, are you wearing contact lenses? And I'm like, no, they're real. They're mine, thank you so much. But at uni, there's this lecture, we were reading a book, and it was about a black slave girl in the book who wanted blue eyes because she was taught that was beautiful. And the lecturer made a comment in front of everyone saying, oh, but that would have been so weird if she'd had blue eyes. Like, can you imagine? And without like everybody, I could just feel these eyes on me. I was just like, just swallow me into the ground, please. Like, it was the most uncomfortable feeling of like, I don't belong. And also, she's basically saying that would be weird. Like, I look strange, which is also not nice. As a girl at uni, you're like, no, you don't want to be told that you're ugly or weird or whatever. So that I struggled with for a long time is wanting to fit in, but because of my looks, I guess I don't. Yeah.
I think with the book in question, was that the Bluest Eye? Was that the book that you were reading at the time?
It was Bernardine Evaristo. I forgot the name of the book. I'm going to have to look it up. But it's one of Bernardine Evaristo's, whose other book, Girl, Woman, Other, is also amazing.
The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. The Bluest Eye. It sounds like quite a similar story and quite a similar book, so that's also worthwhile another look. That's on your read list for next month, Aimee.
Yes.
Steve, we'll come to you. When was the last time you felt excluded in a situation?
It's like so a lot of what you were just saying, Aimee, around kind of being dismissed, people trying to one up and things, tapped into a lot of kind of the last time I felt excluded. So I'm a big fan of empathy and self-compassion. I'm doing some work around Brené Brown at the moment, and kind of I think for me, when somebody isn't listening, I feel excluded. And the kind of the closest example I've got recently is kind of sadly one of the reasons why I'm living in London. To be honest, if I tell the absolute truth whilst we're all together, it's kind of like living with somebody during lockdown that was a friend that we didn't necessarily ever see ourselves living and working together for 6 months. It creates a lot of tension, it creates conflict and things get brought up. And I do suffer occasionally from depression, and I went into a bit black hole, and they just didn't really fit that very well. And their reaction to it was to kind of finger point and poke and ask invasive questions, and it pushed me away. That's the reason that I decided to move out of that house. So I feel excluded when somebody isn't listening. That can come in the form of not paying attention, trying to fix the problem for me, or just not even giving me space to talk and not to talk over me. So it's misunderstanding by myself, isn't it? That kind of like I come in from work one day with a housemate before I started working for myself. And how did it? Oh, it was so bad. And then like 45 minutes later, I'd be still waiting for that. And how was yours?
Yeah.
Just fine. So it's got me down to listening to me. It's just part of inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agree.
And I think that sometimes happens with your mental health as well. When you want to talk to someone about your mental health, if you have gone down that dark hole, is that some people don't believe it exists. Some people don't believe it's real. So you're kind of saying that you're suffering from anxiety. So I had an anxiety attack a few weeks ago, and people are just like, "Oh no, you just get yourself worked up." It's like, well, no, that's not it. You literally feel like you're going to die, and you want to talk to someone about it, and you want that support. And people some people, not obviously all people, but some people just don't get that actually mental health is very real, it's very dangerous, and sometimes you just want someone to listen to what it is that you've got to say. And I think that's what you needed at that time, Steve, was just for someone to actually have a shoulder or have an ear, just to kind of, for you to kind of open up and talk about what was going on. Rich, coming to you, obviously the line of work that you do as well is obviously working with some brands and agencies around kind of diversity and inclusion. Do you think they're getting it right at the minute? I know we did an episode of the podcast about this last week, but do you think that businesses are getting inclusion right when it comes to kind of media and advertising, or do you think there's still a lot to do?
I think there's definitely a lot to do. I think in the last couple of months, it's really been a turning point for a lot of people to realise, where people actually stopped and listened for the first time, rather than try to solve a problem they didn't understand in the first place. Yeah. If you talk about exclusion, like, as a gay man, like, exclusion is something that happened to me as soon as I came out. And you're kind of, when you ask name a specific time that I'm excluded, I kind of feel like I'm excluded out of most things, unless somehow you're not otherwise. I think that's why it's so scary when you first come out, because you're kind of deciding to be excluded. You're included in everything, and then you decide that you know that as soon as you come out, you're going to be excluded from certain conversations and certain things. And the advertising industry especially has a big part to play in that, because they excluded all different types of minority groups, and they still do for years. I said to you, Chris, before, one part of the reason why I came into the Diversity Standards Collective was because I've got a 5-year-old, and as much as I tell her having gay dads, it doesn't make her different. She's 97% less likely to see a family like hers in advertising and marketing than her friends. Yeah. So even now, when she's playing with toys, she'll say, "This has got a mummy and a daddy," and I would be like, "Oh, well, maybe that squirrel's got 2 daddies." She's like, "No." This, and I can notice because all of her friends play it like that. And I think we're at a turning point. Just to go back to your question, we're at a turning point now where a horrendous occasion has suddenly made a lot of people, as I said, listen rather than try to solve it, which is great. We just need to be putting that into action now. I just had a big rant on LinkedIn because I saw that Trump had decided that he was going to stop people from teaching about white supremacy and unconscious bias. Yeah. And you actually can be taken off the government register or whatever if you start teaching it. And I'm like, okay, great. So at a pivotal point where people have started to listen, he's going to stop people talking about, people are realising that we had those problems and that we're ready to say, yeah, we made those mistakes. Let's make sure this is a more equal place. Yeah. And he's stopping that. So for me, this is a perfect time for those allies who've shouted about it over the last 3 months to stand up and say, we're not doing what you say. We're going to stand by what we believe in, just to prove it's not lip service. Yeah. And it's actual action.
I was just going to say there is that it's obviously happening on both sides of the pond at the moment as well. We had the Tories come out last week and say that they weren't going to do unconscious bias training. And it's, well, why not? If we're expecting businesses to run it out and to talk about diversity and inclusion and to talk about unconscious bias and how this country can move forward, especially everything that's happened this year, and then for our government to turn around and say, nah, we're not going to do it, because they're probably scared about the type of biases that they have and what's going to come out.
Yeah, they felt like it was a trap, I think. I think they literally just thought that everyone was going to be like, see, you're racist, like this. But it's not like everybody has an unconscious bias. It's almost impossible to be 50-50.
What was really disappointing as well is one of the MPs is our local MP for Ashfield, which is North Nottingham, Ben Bradley, and I've spoken about him previously on another podcast as well, is Ashfield is not the most fanciest of areas, shall we say. It's like former mining towns, and there's a lot of low socioeconomic status within the Ashfield district. And for him to come out and say, actually, I don't want to learn about my biases against everybody else, perhaps from a lower socioeconomic group or people of colour, that, like, as a representative from our area, like, I was disgusted by it. And I never do this, but I've actually written an email to him because of this, and I've asked him for an interview as part of a future podcast series to see if he's willing to have a conversation about it. I doubt it. However, we'll see what happens. Pat, I'm going to come to you because obviously, previous to Fund Apps, you were in quite a masculine industry, shall we say?
Yeah, you could say that. Most of my career has been in the Australian mining industry, which obviously is highly dominated by masculine, sometimes second, third generational people, lots of small little towns, small little mining communities set up. And I made a very conscious decision that wasn't the kind of environment where I felt like I wanted to be myself. That went for about 5 years or so. And after a while, I think I became pretty good at playing straight. It actually felt kind of natural. You know that when you walk into the office and somebody says, how was your weekend? And you might have gone on a date. You might have been with a local LGBT organization, and you know how quickly to just be able to say, yeah, pretty quiet, watched a bit of Netflix, how was yours? Yeah. And know how to deflect that conversation away. And after a while, you get pretty good at it. And it got to one point where the first person in the mining industry who I shared this part of me with, I think delivered probably what I still hold as the masterclass in empathy and listening. And I think it comes back to what Steve said around the ability to genuinely take on and demonstrate empathy and sit with that person, both mentally and physically, and talk about what's going through with open ears. And after I shared with her, she was my manager at the time. After I shared with her, look, I'm gay, she didn't do the two most obvious things, which are generally counterproductive. Normally it's, well, I don't care about that. I don't see it. It's like when all the people say, well, I don't see the color of your face. I'm like, well, you should see the color of people's face. It's a huge part of their identity. So the same thing, well, I don't want you not to care about the fact that I'm gay. It's had the biggest influence on my approach to HR out of anything else in my life. I want you to care. That's what I'm telling you. Or the opposite one, which is almost trying to normalize it too far. Oh, my sister's gay.
Or do you know such who's gay as well?
Yeah, I always play the joke with people because I think it's harmless. It's just, I think it's well intended, just poorly executed. I normally play the joke when somebody says, "Oh, I know Bob. He's gay and everything. He's from Australia too." And I'm like, "Yeah, gay Bob from Australia. We go a long way back." And it's well intended, poorly executed. And she was the first example of someone who I think got it from an empathy and listening, because the only thing she said to me was, "Thank you so much for sharing that part of you with me. I really appreciate it." And that was it. And I left that conversation not feeling like I needed to tell anyone else in the mining industry, because I had that space. Yeah. She created that space as a manager, regardless of what HR teams did, regardless of how many, flags we were putting up for Mardi Gras and Pride, regardless of the purple cake sale to raise money for LGBT charities. None of that mattered, because my manager created a space where I felt, for the first time probably in my life, I felt genuine inclusion. And that for me, I hold that as, the people who've shared their sexuality and gender identity since then. I always reflect on that experience. Listen, take it on, thank them, and do nothing else. And it normally does well.
And I think that's really powerful. I think empathetic listening is something that really, as of this year, is starting to come to the forefront. I know, Steve, you posted about it the other day there on Instagram. And I think it's something that needs to start happening more. I think as a species, we want to kind of come up with resolutions really, really quickly, and we want to try and resolve an issue, but actually we're not listening to what people are truly saying. So like what you're saying there, Pat, is that you told your boss or the member of HR that you were gay. However, you didn't really want it to go any further. You didn't need to have a conversation with someone else because she listened to what it was that you were saying. She could have easily have gone around the office and be like, Pat's gay, Pat's gay, Pat's gay. But actually her ability to listen to you empathetically was really, really important, and I think that's something that more and more people are starting to do. We've still obviously got a long way to go, and I think that's why allies are so important. And Jack, like you've said, you're a white, straight, privileged male, but as an ally to all things diversity and inclusion, you've set up this wonderful space in this community that you're trying to create through Dinc. I think that's really, really important. We need more people like Jack to be able to make a way for us and to help support anybody who's diverse going forward. I suppose we'll wrap up in a second. I just want to So obviously, again, each one is the big focus for this week. And I just want to ask everyone, what are you going to do to pay it forward this week? Pat, I know you're in New York, but if everyone can commit to one thing that they could pay forward this week with regards to inclusion, whether that's having a conversation with someone, having a cup of tea with someone, sharing an article, anything like that. Charlotte, we'll start with you.
Oh, that's a really great question. At Experience, what we're doing actually is having honest conversations with ourselves, really, to try to identify our missed opportunities to be allies or to improve the way that we work. So one of my missed opportunities has in the last year or so been, and probably way before that as well, to be honest, is not applying an intersectional lens to my Pride network leadership as much as I could. So then when you've then identified your missed opportunity, you then turn that into action. So how am I going to ensure that I correctly follow up with our menopause network or our Black at Experience network to make sure that I'm sharing the great work that we're doing, but then also offering them allyship into how can the Pride network support them. So that's going to be my my goal now for forever until I get better at it.
Love it. Rich?
Cool. I had I think when you're in D&I and you talk about it quite a lot of the time, especially when you're facilitating, I do a lot of with agencies, like facilitate conversations. And I find actually that when people put things on me, sometimes I can get a bit defensive. I don't think I'm outwardly being overly defensive. I think we all sometimes, when you talk about it so much, it actually takes an emotional toll on you that because realistically you're just talking about respect each other, but in such a hybrid way that you kind of feel like you're fighting a battle for everybody, or your whole, every gay man in the LGBT person fighting for. So my real thing at the moment is just to make sure that even when people come back to me with some sort of defensive comment, I portray to them the same reaction I expect from them, which is this empathy and listening. So I don't come back, even if they're wrong and I have a correct answer for them, or I feel like they're being homophobic or disrespectful to another community. If that's not the place, I try and come back to them, because I found literally the last week, it completely diffuses them to start listening. So that's a framework that I'm trying to take on at the moment.
Cool.
Is to be what we expect from others, I suppose.
I love that. Jack?
I think for me this week it's mostly about going to be having meaningful conversations with as many people as I can in the lead up to our launch as well. So just taking on as much information as I can. Where are we taking as much feedback? Where are we potentially failing? Areas we could be adding to, and just making sure that we're doing everything that's right as possible, and continuing to wave the flag of allyship.
Perfect. Pat?
Yeah, mine's a fairly specific one, I guess, because we're kind of midway through it. We often talk about diversity and inclusion in a range of, I think, things we're familiar with when it comes to, people's gender, people's sexuality, their age, the color of their skin. And two of the topics that we really haven't approached that much as a company have been around neurodiversity, which was mentioned before, really understanding the impact of that at work, really understanding what are the practical things our managers can do and I can support them with to build an inclusive culture for neurodiverse people. And the other one is intersectionality. We're a little bit too linear when we think about diversity sometimes, and I think we need to understand what lived experience looks like as a company from all of the various people who are immigrant women in America, and going through a whole range of different emotions, which can't just be cast as one certain thing. The lens I look through it is as a white, male, gay person. That is intersectionality. I think we can go a bit deeper than just a single layer of diversity. So that's on our cards, 2 topics we want to approach Fund Apps to start working on this week.
Amazing. And Steve?
Probably one I'm allowed to wants to just use everything that I'm learning this week to create some kind of kind of piece of content towards the end of the week, and doing it again later on in the week. We are involved in Chris, but also as well then from a personal point of view, I think having had some distance now, moved to my new location, and there's a few people I need to pick up the phone and have a conversation with and include them and push them away, just to deal with my own crap. So starting opening some doors is probably a way of including them.
Yeah, I love that. And Aimee?
Yeah, I think kind of like Pat was saying, I really want to learn, the other types of diversity. That's something that I'm really kind of piecing together. And I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, it was incredibly positive on the whole. And I'm so glad it happened, but I'm also quite exhausted. I think I have a lot of friends, and I think I was their kind of go-to for information for a long time. And I think now I'm just kind of coming over that hill and I'm thinking, okay, I don't have to be everybody's go-to. I can just say, go read a book, or like, Google. I think that now I kind of want to focus on family. That sounds really trite amongst all this, but really recently, I came from Manchester originally, then moved to Cambridge when I was. All of my black family in Manchester around me to literally all white, except my mum, my sister, and my brother, and that has an effect on you as a mixed race person. You sometimes feel like you belong everywhere, and sometimes like you belong nowhere. It's quite a complicated thing sometimes. And I think for my mum right now, she's back home in Cambridge. I'm in London, and she's literally the only black person in Cambridge. I mean, you can contest that, but I'm pretty sure. And I think I just need to be there for her right now. I think she's been doing an amazing job. She's got a book club that she has with her friends. But, I think there's a lot of questions that come at her. How do you feel about this, Maureen? My mum's saying, how do you feel about this? And how do you feel about this book about slavery again, or about this black person narrative again? And I think that's pretty exhausting. Yeah. So, family.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's nice. I think intersectionality has come up quite a lot in what everyone's been saying in conversations, and I think for me, I think it's something that I need to explore more, as well as intersectionality as a place to grow, not only as an individual but also as a business as well, and reading more. So I have God knows how many books on diversity and inclusion, and a lot of them I've read, but there's still a lot more that I need to do. And I'm able to read these books and then pass on that information, or pass on the books to someone else kind of moving forward. I think that's quite important, because there's no point in holding on to these things. So if I can gift them to someone else, that'd be a really good thing. And also we're launching a book club as well as part of your D&I. So our book club launches next month as part of Black History Month, in association with WHGT. So we're partnering with them to launch the book club middle of next month, so there's more information to come out from that. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone from all over for taking the time to obviously spend with us this afternoon, and it's been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate the time that everyone's given up, because I know everyone's super busy this week with everything that's going on. And join us next time for episode 2 of Diversity, and more information to follow this week. But again, big thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.